Welcome to the Lit Fiction Podcast, your guide to insightful short story analysis. Our blend of scholarly depth and relatability makes literature accessible to everyone. Hello, I'm Joey, your host for this week's episode of the Lit Fiction Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jennifer and Colin to look ahead into our new year of reading. Today we'll be discussing our goals for 2025 and what we hope to accomplish. So let's jump right into it. What piece of literature is a must get to for you this year? And this doesn't have to be necessarily something that we have to discuss, but something that you could also be reading in your personal time.
Joey, I'm so glad you asked that question. So, I am definitely going to read James by Percival Everett. He was on the Man Booker Prize shortlist, and it's the reworking of the adventures of Huckleberry Finn as told through Jim's eyes, who now wants to be called James. So, I think that's just going to be a thrilling read.
Okay, I already said it, and I'm getting it on the record this time. Again, I'm gonna say I want to get back and do these classics from the very beginning. So, and I've read several. I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, but I want to reread them. So I'm gonna say five for sure. So, Epic of Gilgamesh, Iliad, the Odyssey, Metamorphoses by Ovid, and the Aeneid by Virgil. I want to get through these, and and I
Yeah.
actually have 5 or 10 more, but I don't want to go overboard here.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have long lists, including me. I'd have a long list, but if I have to pick one, I would say Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol because I've not read it and I've read almost all of his short stories. So it's something that I definitely want to get to.
Oh, I love that one. I love Dead Souls. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, even though I think he burnt the second one or like part of the part of the first one.
He did. He
What
did.
a
And
dick.
it's an interesting book. Oh, not the he kind of apologizes to his readers. I thought it was a joke, but I think it's serious at the beginning.
Hmm.
Gogol is an interesting guy, but that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get to it because I love him. Okay. Are there authors or an author you would like to give less time to in the new year?
So, Joey, I think for me, this is a category of authors and not a specific one. I think we have read a lot of classic male, stereotypical kind of older voices. And I would love to re engage with some very young, fresh, out of the mainstream writers. So I'm not sure who they are, but I'm looking forward to finding them out. How about you, Colin?
Nothing comes to mind. No, I don't. I tend not to read a lot of the same author. I read fairly broadly, so there's no one author that I feel like I've read too much of it. The converse is true. I need to read more Dostoevsky. I want to read all of Borges and etc. So yeah, it's kind of the opposite for me. There's nobody I want to cut back on. I just want to increase across the board. If
Awesome.
that's
And Colin, I just want to amend one thing that I said there is that I would like to read the 7 novels that were on the Man Booker Prize list for 2024. I have found throughout my lifetime of reading, the Man Booker Prize does a great job of sort of opening up to some of these extra voices and very internationally flared stories. So that's going to be my go to source. How about you, Joey?
You almost call me Kelly.
I do that every time. It's like, come on, Kelly.
I don't know why it has my full name on here. Anyway, yeah, I don't have an author in particular or authors that I would like to spend less time on. I think I said my piece about Laura Segal last time. So I'm not giving it, I'm not against her. I'm just saying I hated that story. But I would say that just being more discerning, like I said last time, about the New Yorker stories and making sure that it's something that is what we think is worthy of discussion. To the opposite of this, what author or authors do you want to include that we have yet to talk about?
I'm down with Margaret Atwood. So I feel that we could really enjoy looking through some of her stories. I think she has a new book of poetry out. So I think she can really span a lot of our interests. So that's hot on my to do list for 2025.
And representing Canada.
Oh yeah, I actually agree. I haven't read much Margaret Atwood at all, and by Joey's recommendation, and I recently picked up a short fiction collection by E.M. Forster. So I think we must. I often talk about E.M. Forster, his because he wrote some famous. He had those famous lectures on literature, and I often quote for those. He had this idea of round and flat characters, right? And this idea that a story has to be causally connected. The events, it can't just be event following event. There has to be this causal chain, this causal link in the short story, in the short story and whatnot, and quite humorous too. But in terms of Forster's fiction, I haven't read a lot. So I think we should definitely do some E.M. Forster this year.
Agreed. I love him so much. The authors that I would like to include, I have a little bit of a list. Toni Morrison, okay, obviously, even though she only has one short story, but we should still read it. Dostoevsky, I think like Notes from Underground and Winter Nights or White Nights, sorry, definitely great. Gogol, I don't think we've done The Overcoat yet. Obviously, we have to do that. A lot of Russians are on this list, so Jennifer, probably not for you, but Pushkin, Turgenev. I don't know if Turgenev has short stories.
Oh yes,
When
Turgenev's
oh, he
Hunter
does?
sketch Turgenev's Hunter sketches is one of my favorite collections. These are so amazing. And who is it? I read in um what was it? Frank O'Connor said that Turgenev's collection, Frank O'Connor, the famous short story writer, said I think I'm getting, is it Frank O'Connor? Anyway, Turgenev's Hunter's sketches, the greatest collection. And they're not really full short stories, they're sketches, but they're just so evocative and so interesting. We must do some of the Turgenev like let me see, Biezhen Lee and some others. These are just they're great stories or sketches. They're just so evocative and interesting. So sorry to interrupt, Turgenev
That's a
for sure.
yeah, no, that's I didn't I've only read one thing by Turgenev, but I really loved it, and it lives rent free in my head, as the kids would say. Okay, so what are your goals for our podcast this year? Or maybe it's just one goal, but whatever you have to say.
So, Joey, my primary goal is to continue to have these discussions about literature and flash fiction and poetry in a way that resonates both with us and during the conversation and hopefully adds something to someone else's perspective on reading. And a big goal for me in 2025 is the launch of Poetry Pause, which you will hear more about in 2025 in January. But as Colin had mentioned, we've gotten really, really excited about poetry on this podcast, and we would like to devote a dedicated space to be able to explore that further. So, that for me is the most exciting thing that I'm looking forward to. That's a bit of a pivot from when we currently are.
For me, now one of the original idea I had was to write essays, interpretive essays, and I did a few of these on the site. They're on our lit fiction site, but we had to take a step back from that because we had to rebuild the website, which is launching very soon, I promise you. And we're gonna relaunch the website, and once that's done, this is kind of a lot of technical work that we didn't want to pay anyone to do because we're on a budget, so we had to do it ourselves. So this has been a lot of work. But once this is done, I want to get back to writing just and posting essays, more essays on the lit fiction website. And I think that initially my idea was to write an interpretive essay on the stories, but I'm thinking this is going to be, we're going to talk about essays. We talked about one recently. We talked about Virginia Woolf essay, and we mentioned Montaigne, but I think I'm going to write, my plan is to write more essays, more on just the experience of reading and in certain aspects of reading that perhaps our listeners will enjoy reading about, as well as interpretive essays. But yeah, that's my plan, is to get back to start regularly writing and posting in the essays section.
That guy Montaigne, is that his name? Yeah, I just bought a thing of like selected essays from him since you were talking about him. I just happened to see it at a used bookstore. And I was like, this is like $1. I'm gonna buy this. So we'll see if I like it. I don't know. Okay, so my goal is to continue what we've been doing, which is to hopefully inspire our listeners to read the stories that we're discussing. But I really want to hear back from the people that are listening and after they've read it, or maybe, if they just kind of got a summary of it or something. What are their opinions? What are your opinions, our audience? And let us know, because especially if you disagree, we'd love that. We want to hear you say, like, no, actually, I think you're wrong. And this way I think about the story. So don't be shy. Okay. So what is a topic you would like to continue, or something that we have not explored yet in more depth?
So that's an easy one for me. One of the things that I have so enjoyed in my collaboration with both you, Joey, and Colin is bringing in these technical details of why the stories work or why they don't. So when we talk about perspective and we talk about reliable narration and sort of some of these more technical terms that maybe an everyday reader doesn't know what they mean, I really want us to be able to define some of those and help us be a little bit more critical looking at stories from the viewpoint of, did this story work? And if it did, how did it work and why? So for me, the art of storytelling is something I really would like to explore further, which I think also helps people, not just writers, but readers, really sink their teeth into like, why did I like this story? And is it a well written story, even if I thought it wasn't for me?
Yep, I concur perfectly. I think this is something that, as a reader, I didn't take literature in university. I don't have a literature degree, but I've been pretty meticulous about looking for books on how to be a better reader. I've taken courses, not in university, but I've taken courses on online and through various companies on how to be a better reader. And I love these kind of discussions, and I think it's something our readers might enjoy as well. So I'm completely on board with this. I love this idea of just breaking things down, talking about certain aspects, and just how it relates to what we're currently reading and whatnot. Yeah, I think just helping everybody become a more attentive reader, ourselves included, right? And I think Joey, you have a degree in literature, right? So you can bring a vast amount of expertise to this topic.
I do have a literature degree. I would say that the topic that I would like to we talk about all quite a bit is stoicism, but going really in depth and reading the source material itself and not just I mean, it is great to reference, of course, because it's in so many things and so many people discuss stoicism but do not understand what these people actually said because there's a lot of harmful rhetoric that's being circulated and it's sort of manipulating what the Stoics actually were talking about, and it's sort of become something that's a bit harmful. So I would like to talk about that and go really deep into that conversation, which would probably have to be a few parts. It'd be a little bit of a mini series for us because there's so much to talk about, and there's so many texts that we should be reading and talking about to fully to get a better understanding of that. And obviously, Colin is our stoicism expert between the three of us, at least. And so I think we're in a good spot. We've all read Stoic tech, but yes, Colin will lead the way, I'm sure on that. What author or theme would you like to challenge yourself with in the upcoming year?
That is super easy for me. So, everything you and Colin talked about your amazing Russian male writers that you just can't get enough of. They're not for me. They're still not for me. I'm still going to keep trying. So, for me, delving into some of this classic Russian literature to even just cross it off my list. I'm like, make sure you really don't like this before you rule out a whole category. And I am so optimistic that my ideas about Russian literature will change as a result of this challenge. So stay tuned. We'll see. But that would be a big stretch for me to dive into the Russians with you guys.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about if you give it a fair shot and you don't enjoy it, then don't read it, right? I mean, this is I did speaking of courses on literature, I listened to the course called The Art of Reading by I think Timothy Spurgeon. I have to confirm the professor, but he says this. He has this thing in his course. He calls it the 50-page test. He says if you've read 50 pages, he's like, don't give up immediately. Don't, give it 50 pages. But he's like, once you've read that much, he says, feel free to say you gave it a fair shot and move on. Because this shouldn't be a chore for us, right? Again, ultimately we read for enjoyment, to enrich our lives, not to punish ourselves with something we simply don't like to read. So I would think that's great advice, right? It doesn't you don't have to read all the classics. I mean, some of them you just won't enjoy it. I mean, like you said, I mean, literature, well, there are, some objective criteria, right? Perhaps, obviously, story has to be constructed properly. It can't be rife with certain errors or problems in perspective and whatnot. But that being said, it comes down to personal preference, right? And if it doesn't resonate with you, there's so much out there that will, right? And but I love the idea of just giving it its fair chance because you don't know what you're missing if you just stick to, as we talked to before, a few authors, right? So it's good to read eclectically, but if you're not digging it, just move on. There's something else great out there. We don't have time to read everything that's great, of course. So we have to be selective. So I think that's it. I don't think I would. It was with Joyce and Ulysses. I go back to this. I didn't enjoy reading it. I did. There was enriching. It was enriching to be in the book club and to discuss it. And it's certainly a pivotal book, and I reference it a lot. But I wouldn't probably read it again, or I wouldn't read Finnegan's Wake for sure, because there's so much out there that is enriching and for me personally extremely enjoyable. Right. I would say I want to read classic English literature going back to the very earliest ones. I've read Beowulf before and I'm rereading it and really enjoying it. So I definitely want to go back to these earlier knights errant tales, like the Green Knight, or is that what it's called? The Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Joey will know.
Yep. Yeah, that's it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
these kind of older canonical English texts in particular, I want to challenge myself this year. I have the Norton Anthology, the of English literature, the volumes that cover these initial the incipient texts, and I want to read these. I want to challenge myself with these for sure.
Oh, we should definitely. I have lots of opinions on those. Okay. So, one thing that I would like, I guess the more of an era would be modernism, because I've read a lot of modernist texts, but I just think I'm missing something where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if this is for me. So, specifically Virginia Woolf, I'm determined I'm going to find something else other than Orlando that I really like. I just bought To Lighthouse. I'm going to try that. We'll see how it goes. And I want to reread Mrs. Dalloway since I read that quite a few years ago, and I think maybe my tastes have changed. I don't know why I want to like Virginia Woolf. I think I just want to be like bougie, and I want to like her, but I just don't. Okay.
I
I
think,
know.
Joy, you just want to be a little bit more like me because she's like
Yeah.
the poster child for great reading and writing, and you're just like, no, can't get into it. So I am
Yeah.
cautiously optimistic that you'll get there, but I also know you, and I hope that yeah, it works out.
I'll end up reading like everything she's ever written, and I'll still be like, I just don't like her. What is your reading goal for this year? Your personal reading goal for number?
So mine is easy. I love things that have some poetic symmetry to it. So it's 25 in 2025. So I am going to pick some very eclectic tales, including all of the Man Booker Prize shortlist for fiction. And I think that will be a great jumping off point. But I will read 25 books and enjoy them the new year.
Okay, I'm gonna go for 50 books or book equivalents, and by that I mean how many short stories make a book? Maybe 10 or 12. So 50 book or book equivalents this year. That is my goal. So
Okay,
about
good.
one a week. About one a week, right?
Yeah, good goals. Mine is forever. I always lowball myself at 75, but I will actually end up reading about 100. So I'm actually my secret goal to myself is 100. And that's attainable. I can definitely do that.
I love that, Joy. Can I just put one little thing in there for the people who may listen to this podcast and go like, "You're insane." Like that is just a really high number of books to be read. And I think for me, my number is kind of low. And even if somebody who's not accustomed to reading a lot reads one novel or two novels or a nonfiction and they actually enjoy the experience, I'm like, that's a win. Like that you won the whole category for the whole year. So
Yeah.
I think it's such a personalized experience that for me, slowing down, savoring it, rolling around in these beautiful books is more rewarding for me than kind of just flipping through my pages.
Agreed, agreed. And I've read some famous people, some famous artists, authors who have taken the opposite approach, that you should read less and read it more deeply, right? Um, for example, you could reread Shakespeare, you could reread the Iliad, the Odyssey so many times, and each time take something new from it. So there is that quality versus quantity thing. But I'm of the opinion I'd like to balance this as much as possible. Artfully read, but also read a lot to the extent that I'm not just skimming and rushing through it, right?
To be fair, it does sound that 100 books is a lot, but I'm also reading like I don't want to say serious literature. I'm reading stuff like Dostoevsky, but I'm also reading like things that I don't have to fully pay attention to. Not that I'm skimming it, but it's like I don't care to remember everything about this after I'm done reading. It's purely enjoyment. So that is it goes very quickly when you're reading like that.
And,
Yeah,
you also have a literature degree. I mean, you've been trained to read a lot and to read deeply at the same time, right? This comes probably from years of dedicated practice. So
Yeah, that's true. I've had a lot of practice with having to read a large volume of work in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, and Joy, thank for just reminding us that, you can balance out serious literary works with a pulp fiction novel or a genre or something or a graphic novel. Like I would love to like flip through some, I have a graphic novel about Kafka and the trial. And it's like I would really love to savor that and it counts just as much. So let's not forget to, inject some pleasure reading in addition to the things that we're learning in 2025.
Thank you for listening to the Lit Fiction Podcast. Head over to our website at litfiction.com to check out an edited transcript of today's discussion and more literary content like essays, curated music playlists, and original artwork. And don't forget to follow us on social media at lit_fiction on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.